One of my friends had given me the New Yorker when Brokeback Mountain and recommended that I have a look at it. He said it was quite good. And about 2/3 of the way through, I began to sob, and I sobbed all the way to the end. It was so affecting.
It really is I think, a kind of gut punch. You know, it just goes right to you, and it doesn't let you go.
Diana read the story in the New Yorker, like many other people, and insisted that I read it. I can't write short fiction, and I rarely read short fiction. But I did it, I read it, and I recognized, and my first reaction actually was I wish I had written it, because it's been laying there in the West for a long time. Attraction between cowboys.
I said, well, what do you think would make a good screenplay? And he said, I think it might. And I said, well, why don't we write Annie a letter? And he said, okay. So that was pretty much how it started.
I was in a gym, and I was doing a treadmill, and I was looking for something to read, and this was about, gosh, 6, 7 years ago, and saw a copy of the New Yorker magazine, and opened it up, and there's a story, and I just started reading it. Annie Proulx is a fabulous writer, and I couldn't finish the story during the exercise, so I swiped the magazine, took it home, and finished it. I heard that Larry McMurtry and Diana were writing it, and I thought, when I read it, I thought that'd be perfect for something for them to write.
Creatively, there are a few things that I found particularly challenging. First of all, 2 big writers. That's a lot of pressure, the legendary writers. And then structurally, it's very interesting, it's very challenging. It is an epic short story because the story covers a big territory, but it's a 30 pages short story.
It's nobody's business but ours.
You know I ain't queer.
Me neither.
When you take that short story and try to say, how do we make it into a feature film, it's not simply that you just add on extra scenes and somehow you get to the magical feature film length. You have to take a short story and make it novelistic. And that process proved to be incredibly detailed. Although Larry and Diana made it look easy, every single character had to have their own kind of world, their own worldview, somehow approachable in the course of the film.
You just have to figure out what to use and what not to use. And of course, sometimes even with a novel, you have to make up things because it's not all there.
We used every bit of that story. Virtually every sentence is used somewhere in the screenplay.
And it's still only 50 pages of the screenplay. It's only half of the screenplay. So we did have to make up the rest. We had to double it, essentially. But Annie's story, the blueprint was really there, so we could take a single sentence and just go.
And make a domestic scene of it, because what we added essentially was fleshing out the domestic life of the 2 guys, their marriages, their children, their troubles, etc. The domesticity was suggested. The problems in it were suggested, but we fleshed it out.
This is my house, this is my child, and you are my guest. You sit down before I knock your ignorant ass in the next week.
And the process, I mean, I think Larry and I complement one another. We're really very different from one another. I mean, it's clear just by the way we write. He's on a manual typewriter and I'm on a computer. But he seems more interested in the women characters, certainly.
Oh, wait, hold on. You don't think I'm too fast, do you? Maybe we should put the brakes on?
I read it and I was like, oh, wow. I always did recognize it as being the love story that it is. It's just being heartbreaking and very, very real. I mean, the level of honesty that the characters express in the dialogue and the story, that definitely appealed to me.
I left word for you with Steve at the ranch. Man, you must have got those notes I left at your place.
I wanted to be part of this movie because the script was so beautiful. I think the story is really incredible. It's something that you haven't seen before.
Larry seems to feel that I have more intuitiveness about the men than he does.
What if you and me had a little ranch somewhere, a little cow and calf operation? Be a sweet life.
I read it. I loved the script. I thought it was the best screenplay I've read. And I guess for me, it's a story of how love transcends all.
The first time I read it, I just was immediately drawn to the idea that love stories were not told in this way, and it felt like the struggles and the trials that it takes to actually be in love and to keep it going, or you know, that's what it's about.
You want to swallow about half your fucking teeth, huh?
We thought that we did a very precise script in which we got as much as you can get in an adaptation of what the author had put on the page.
We hooked up with Larry McMurtry and Diana Osana to try to make the film back when I was an independent producer. And we tried for a couple of years, and no one would pay much attention to us. It was just not a film that felt green lightable at the time.
Larry and Diana's screenplay was known certainly in Hollywood, it was known as one of the great unproduced screenplays. I think people were afraid of it. So it was no easy task to get the movie made, but the hope was if you make this movie, people will be impacted and affected by these characters and by their story.
When we formed Focus Features, and suddenly I and my partner David Lindy were on the other side of the desk, and it was up to us to greenlight it. So we kind of held our breath and said, let's go make it.
After the short story, I got the chance to read the screenplay, and it stayed with me. I started thinking about making the movie right away. I just know in the bottom of my heart, if I let this thing go, I regret for the rest of my life.
You ever rodeo?
You know, I mean, once in a while, when I got the entry fee in my pocket. Yeah.
Well, you from ranch people?
Yeah, it was.
It's framed by the West, i.e. it can be called a Western. I don't really think of it as a Western. I think of it as a drama.
Not so much the movie genre Western, which is a fictionalized environment. It's not the gunslingers, but more of a Annie Proulx, Larry McMurtry kind of territory, realistic Western, rural life in west of America.
The West is rich in character and experience. It's a very real, gritty, raw. We like that. We like the reality of it.
It's a film that pays very careful attention to the specificity of the American West, as it really was and still is from the 1960s on through today. Larry McMurtry and Diana Osana and Annie Proulx are enormously dedicated to the idea of paying attention to the smallest piece of verisimilitude they can find to give the story the depth and the grain of reality that it needs.
Larry McMurtry once wrote to me and warned me about the nonverbal culture in America. He said some ways it's harder to do than verbal culture.
The wedding will be June 5th at the Methodist Church. Jenny will be singing, and Monroe's going to cater the reception.
It's a laconic culture, you know. People, of course, there are people who babble in any culture, but by and large, cowboys are laconic. They don't say much. They're alone a lot. They're not real comfortable in, you know, social situations in which there are 5 or 6 people to talk at the same time. They tend to be alone with their horses.
That's the true American. Tough people, they come here, build a family, start anew. They're tough people.
But it is a story that's rural. It's about rural country people. It is about people from small towns. These are 2 young men that are very poor. They're not particularly educated. They don't have a lot of prospects. They're certainly not upper-class people. Their main drive in life is survival. They want to make enough money to buy a second shirt or get a new hat or feed themselves, maybe get their truck fixed. You know, their needs are very, very, very basic.
I wish I knew how to quit you.
Then why don't you?
We are stewards of the story, and that we are pretty good stewards of it, and that, to me, it's still Annie's.
It's Annie's story. We stayed true to her writing. We stayed true to the characters and who those characters are as people. Our job in that regard is finished. We're sending it out into the world. It's like, I suppose, raising a child. You hope the child is successful and is accepted, and that's the best you can hope
It ceases
for.
to be yours, it becomes
The world's.
the world's.